Ladies and gentlemen, she's got the insight, she's got the info, she knows what she's talking about, and she'll give us an interesting perspective. So, welcome to Coffee Conversations with Greg Che. Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey, good morning.
Good morning, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, thank you so much for coming. And I really think this is an important dialogue that we must have. And here at Coffee Conversation, I believe in just kind of getting the whole 360 degrees of conversation. It's easy to get out here in these streets and say what we're saying about the police and all that there. But, we want to get a full perspective because we know we have our brothers and sisters out there behind the blue line as well. And we want to get your unique perspective. And before we get into it, I got a question for you. What high school did you go to?
I went to St. Michael's Catholic School, Manchester in Vermont. It's not there anymore.
Oh, not there anymore. Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. All right. So here we are there, Sergeant Dorsey. Look. Man, we're seeing so much on the social media. I mean, just years and years and years of watching, people of color get, maybe I guess murdered by police. I mean, what is your thought as a one who has committed her life to serving the community through law enforcement, which, we need you. But now that you see what you see as a Black woman, as a Black officer, what's your thoughts?
So let me say this, because I was always clear, in terms of who I am when I joined the Los Angeles Police Department. I'm a Black woman first. I'm a mother. I have 4 sons, and I just happen to be a police sergeant, police officer last. And so, seeing what's going on right now is very disconcerting, because I know that this is nothing new. This has been the kind of stuff our community has complained about for years and years. And we were always foo-fooed away because there was never any evidence of it. And also because of the culture of the Los Angeles Police Department. And while I'm going to be talking about LAPD, understand that this is not unique to LAPD. This is across all 18,000 police departments in the United States. And so it wasn't until 92 when we saw the beating of Rodney King that they could no longer deny it, although LAPD tried to minimize and mitigate that bad behavior of those 4 officers. And we know what happened ultimately when they were acquitted. And really, truthfully, what has changed since 1992? Not much, not much, sadly. And listen, with all that's gone on just most recently, I mean, 2014, we had a spate of deadly uses of force and shootings. And then fast forward just a couple of months ago, we saw George Floyd murdered for the first time in front of us on television. We saw a man lose his life, take his last breath. And even since George Floyd, we've had Rayshard Brooks and others who don't make the news. In Vallejo, California, Sean Monterosa, most recently in Newton Division here, a young man was shot and killed by a Newton officer. And a couple of days ago in Austin, Texas, another gentleman was shot by police, and they're minimizing and mitigating it because he was in a vehicle, and the officers are saying, well, I thought he might use his car to hurt others, because police seem to get away with this based on their perception, right?
Wow, incredible. Now, so walk us through this. So okay, let's talk about the George Floyd situation. All right. I have 2 questions. Number one is obvious. I think it's obvious to me, but just explain it to me. So they have whatever was going on prior to what we saw on video. They have Brother Floyd in custody. To me, he's ready to go. They got him hooked up and put him in the car and take him on down there. What is the emotion or the necessity for that officer to have him in that position with his knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds? What's that about?
When I look at George Floyd and others, what I see is I trademark this term that I like to use, contempt of cop. And when I say contempt of cop, what I mean is if you piss one off, there's a price to pay. And we've seen varying degrees of that price. It could be a traffic ticket. They could take you to jail on a Friday, knowing you don't have the financial wherewithal to get out. You spend all weekend in jail. Monday it goes to the DA. It's a reject, but I just took 72 hours out of your life. And so you can't get that back. Floyd was in handcuffs. He was in control. He was not non-compliant. He wasn't refusing to go along with the officer's orders. It was over. Officers are only allowed to use that force necessary to overcome resistance. Once you've overcome whatever resistance they want to feign he was presenting, once he's in handcuffs, they've overcome that resistance. And now it's just off to jail you go. But we know that Derek Chauvin is a special kind of person. We know that he has a history, 18 personnel complaints he had prior to George Floyd. And that department did very little to deter that bad behavior. I would argue that they probably encouraged and in some ways condoned, emboldened him to carry on. But for Mr. Floyd dying, Derek Chauvin would have had 19 personnel complaints. And this wasn't unique to just Derek, because the Asian officer, Tao, who was standing sentry, had also been the subject of an unnecessary use of force. He hit a Black man in the head and knocked his teeth out. And what did the department do? They settled the case. They paid this man $25,000, and that officer lived, like Derek Chauvin, to offend again. They did nothing to deter the bad behavior.
Wow. And as I watched that entire video, you could see, you said contempt of cop. You could see that contempt, in their actions out there. It was like they were having a really, really bad day, even as people were trying to implore them to, hey, look, get off of his neck. You're killing him. You're killing him. It was really, really something. Now, so what you just explained is something that I always say. We can change the rules and policies, but until we can change the hearts of people, we really won't get into, we really won't get much further in police reform, just because these people have it in their heart, I believe.
It's in their heart. Some of them, it's learned, it's taught. I think that, let me say this, that most police officers are there for the right reason and are doing the right thing. But we have some bad apples, and we have to admit that. And there's no shame and harm in saying that. Because if you don't admit there's a problem, then there's nothing to fix. But if sense were common, everybody would have it, right? You can't teach compassion. You can't teach humanity. If someone looks at a person like me, a white officer, and they can't relate to me, if they don't look at me and think that could be my sister, my mom, my grandmother, if they look in the car of Philando Castile and see a small child in the back seat and don't think that could be my baby, and maybe I shouldn't shoot 7 times into this vehicle with a small child, that's a problem. How do you change that mindset? I think officers should be reevaluated. And I just say every 2 years psychologically, to make sure, number one, that they didn't get past that background check initially, that psychological evaluation that we all take initially, and slip through the cracks. Or better yet, they get teamed up with a partner who shows them bad behavior and they begin to model it. We need to have a fireside chat with them every couple of years and just make sure their head is in the right place. And if it's not, then we need to help them to a profession where their skill set is better suited. There's no harm in admitting that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now here we are. Do you think the officers in Minnesota, is there any chance that they will get off?
I can't say, because it's up to a jury when it gets there, right? And part of the problem that I see with everything that goes on is sometimes our community does not get involved and engaged in the way that I think they should. We have to be part of these juries. We have to make ourselves available to be selected for grand juries to sit on, because I know when they're impaneled, sometimes they are in place for as long as a year. And I know I've been guilty of it as well in the day, dodging jury summons. But we need to be there. We need to be there. And also, we need to be on police departments. I say this all the time. I know some of the young people are all about FTP, but if you're not on a police department, you can't be a part of that process that brings about that reform. Wouldn't it have been nice if someone who looks like me, thinks like me, talks like me was with Aaron Dean when he was outside a Tatiana Jefferson's home, in those early morning hours, looking through her window as she played video games with her nephew. Wouldn't it have been nice if I could have been there to look over and see him take out a gun and tell him to put it up? Or if I had been one of those 4 officers with Derek Chauvin, could have told him, get off of his neck, what are you doing? Or if I had been one of the officers with Daniel Pantaleo when he choked Eric Garner to death, because why? He didn't comply, he wouldn't turn around. And so we've got to be on these departments. And I understand, I've had a conversation very recently here with the LAPD Police Chief Mike Moore that, in his belief, it's difficult to find qualified candidates. I've offered my services. And so he knows that I'm here to help him if that's something he's really interested in doing. But they make it difficult. I'm contacted regularly by young people who are trying to get on LAPD and other departments, and they feel as if somehow obstacles are being placed in their way unnecessarily. And so if it were easy to get on, everybody would try it. Police work is not for everybody, but if we're not on these departments, we can't make a difference.
Mm-hmm. You bring up a good point. Police work isn't for everybody. It's just like in the military, certain, military is not for everybody as well. But let me ask you, let's walk through what the rigors of that job are. I mean, because clearly these officers, are under a lot of stress. Your work day, dang, you've seen so many things. What is available to police officers to help them manage the stress of what they see day to day?
Well, I certainly on LAPD, we have a division, a unit, behavioral service science, I think it's what it's called, BSS are the initials. And those are psychologists that are available. But the only time we ever talk to them is if, we get in trouble or we get into a shooting and they compel us to go. Police officers don't self-report. They don't do it because, well, it's not sexy. You don't want to get teased and ribbed by your peers. If you admit, raise your hand and say, I have an issue and I need to talk to somebody. So officers don't self-report. And then they're concerned about, how truthful can they really be in those sessions? Because if you say, the wrong thing, but it really is the right thing to say, then you could have your gun taken away. You can't be a police officer without a gun. And so that's why I believe that police departments should compel police officers to sit down, look them in the eye, and find out what the heck is going on before it makes national news. Because listen, 9 times out of 10, when we see something, when we see a Derek Chauvin, 18 prior personnel complaints, when we see a Garrett Roth who shot Rayshard Brooks in the back, over a dozen personnel complaints, Michael Schlager who shot Walter Scott in the back 8 times. That was the 3rd time he had used a taser inappropriately. So it's never the first time. It's just the first time that it's been so outrageous and egregious that it makes national news.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk Breonna Taylor. What is a no-knock warrant? Are you telling me the police could just walk in my house with a warrant? I'm asleep. No, just walk on in here and search this place?
Back in the day, during the whole war on crime or war on drugs situation, when officers were pursuing narcotics suspects, the premise was that there was a destruction of evidence. And so they came up with this whole no-knock situation where an officer, if you could articulate it in an affidavit to a judge while you're seeking a search warrant for a location, and you believe that this person is heavily armed and they've got a lot of narcotics and they're going to try to destroy it, if we wait, knock, announce, and wait for them to come to the door. So to overcome that, no-knock warrants were created where officers can just come. They don't have to knock. They just bust in the door, and under the guise of, we want to get the drugs before they start destroying it. Well, they've taken this thing to a whole nother level. And now folks understand that, well, if there is destruction of property, isn't that better? Or destruction of evidence, isn't that better than loss of life? Because we've seen no-knock warrants, not only in the case of Breonna Taylor, but in other situations where officers have blown up a door. They've given false information, because police will lie every now and again, given false information to a judge to obtain the search warrant in the first place, and people have been hurt and or killed. And so this was a situation where now it's made national news. This was how they got down over there in Louisville. It wasn't a problem until it was a problem. The officers fabricated information to get that warrant. It's reported that they were judge shopping. In other words, looking for a judge who might look the other way, allow them to not provide the kind of information that a more astute judge would look for, ask for, want before they gave them the authority to do this no-knock warrant. And so this thing was problematic from the very start on the part of the officers, and that's why now at least one of them has been fired and is hopefully going to be facing some criminal charges. They haven't charged just yet, but this is what has been allowed. And like I said, it's not a problem until it's a problem.
Mm-hmm. So they bust down the door and she's asleep, and man, they just shoot and kill her. You know, Sergeant Dorsey, should we be afraid of the police?
Well, I mean, if you look and see what's going on, I mean, certainly, I guess a little fear or a lot of fear is, good. Not only the police. Listen, if you look like me and you got to be afraid of the police. You got to be afraid of civilians who think they're the police, folks who want to be the police. And so, I think it's important that we have a conversation with our family members. I'm constantly talking to my sons and they get sick of me because they're like, Mom, you watch too much news. And I'm like, no, it's just, I know what I know because I live this life. Mm-hmm. And so I tell you what I think might keep you safe. I make no guarantee because I don't know who's on the other end of that encounter. I don't know if it's a Ray Tenzing who shot and killed Sam DuBose or Betty Shelby who shot and killed Terrence Crutcher. So I offer ways in which I think might be helpful, right? Comply, complain later, survive the encounter. The goal is to get home. But, there are always, I believe, red flags when an officer is about to do something stupid. And we've seen them. If you ever see an officer put on black gloves, like we did with the officer who stood over Marlene Pinnock on the Santa Monica freeway and just beat her like he was an MMA fighter, he put on black gloves. When you see officers do that, chances are they're about to put hands on you, and they're putting on gloves, not because they're concerned about anything you're going to do, but probably because they're looking to protect their own knuckles when they start hitting you in the head. When an officer gets aggressive with you, as in the case of the officer who stopped Sandra Bland, when he was done with her, all she had to do was sign the ticket and it was a done deal. And then he says, "You seem like you're bothered." And she said, "You're damn right, I'm bothered." And he says, "Put the cigarette out." The reason that the officer said put the cigarette out is because he had already made up his mind at that point he was going to put hands on her, I believe. And the reason he wanted her to put the cigarette out was so she wouldn't have anything in her hand that she could use to hurt him with, burn him, right? A lighted cigarette. And so when you see officers get aggressive, when they start questioning you and you know that there's no end, when you know that the answers you give are probably never going to suffice, be quiet. Be quiet, be a good wit, comply, and complain.
Wow. All right. So now we hear about the headlines yesterday or this week have been there's these officers who have, I guess, falsified records. And now Jackie Lacey is it's just a big mess happening in LAPD here. So talk about that. What's your thoughts when you heard about that this week? I mean, I know you have probably seen this before, but walk us through that process. And what do you think is going to be the end all? I mean, what are they saying? 200 or 500 cases could be overturned because of these officers. But why do officers do that? Talk to us.
Well, listen, police officers will lie. I think sometimes officers get personally invested in their work. And if you are dealing with, people on a daily basis because they live in an area, you work in this area, and you just can't quite get them, they may be involved in something that could be akin to criminality, but you just can't put your finger on it. You can't get that evidence, that proof. And so you manufacture it, you create it. Or you just straight out lie because there's no consequence for it. I used to work South Bureau Crash in the early 80s, and gangs were prolific. And, I dealt with some of the baddest of the bad back in the early 80s. And I know that it was occurring back then. I didn't participate in it. I didn't work with anyone who did it in my presence. But I know that if we stop a gangster and there's three of them together, all three of them are gangsters. Now, maybe they really aren't, but if you stop one, who you can verify based on tattoos or his admission or whatever, and his cousin is with him, then an officer could, if they're not following policy and procedure, put that person into the system. We complete what we call FI cards, field identification card, and it used to have on the back, are you a gang member or are you an affiliate? Very easy for an officer to say that you're one or the other. And now you're in the system. And once you get in the system as a gangster, that brings all sorts of other problems and prohibitions of opportunities, if you will, based on this thing. And so now we have, and God bless LAPD Chief Mike Moore clutching his pearls, because he was a police officer before he was a police chief. I worked for Mike Moore during my tenure. And so it's not surprising or hard to believe that this kind of foolishness was going on, not only by the gang members, but by the officers that work Metropolitan Division, because those officers who work Metro have free reign of the entire city, and they are what I call Billy Badass. They just drive around. It used to be a phrase back in the day: you jump out the car, you kick ass, you take names, and then you move on. That mentality is still there. It's the culture. And until you start changing that culture, and I mean change it from the top down, we're going to continue to have these problems. And so now we're in an election year. And listen, Jackie Lacey hasn't seen a police shooting, beating, or ass whipping that she couldn't get excited about. She's done nothing. But now all of a sudden she's decided she wants to take some action, because in November she may have to look for a new church home. So I'm not really impressed by anything that she says between now and November.
Yeah, that's the question I want to ask, because people are calling for her head. I mean, have been for quite some time. And so I asked the question on social media: does this change folks, opinion of her? And it does seem a little, pandering, convenient, politically convenient at this time. And I was going to ask your thought about that. Do you feel this is convenience?
It seems a little disingenuous to me. Yeah. Listen, she's been in office for how long? And we know, and I don't agree with the tactics of the Black Lives Matter, in a lot of instances. Showing up at her home at 5 o'clock in the morning is just nonsensical. Mm-hmm. She has an office, and while she should speak with these people, she hasn't. She's refused to, over and over and over again. And I think that stunt that they pulled when they went to her house and her husband didn't help, he's frustrated. He comes to the door. Listen, he's the man of the house and he's had enough. They're showing up at my house at 5 o'clock every morning, right, or however often they come. And so he didn't handle the situation properly. And I think that garnered her a little bit of sympathy, because she was about to get her ass handed to her in that primary. And then she was able to pull it off. And then what happened a few weeks after that, she decided, after an LAPD officer over in Hollenbeck Division beat up a homeless man, Richard Castillo, she decided that she wanted to prosecute this officer. Now, she's never prosecuted a police officer in the history of ever, even when Chief Charlie Beck was here and he recommended an officer be prosecuted for a murder that happened down in Venice Beach. Now, Venice Beach, I think Charlie did that because the officer who did the shooting was Black, and it's kind of easier, in my opinion, to give up a Black officer than you would a white. Whole nother conversation. But Jackie Lacey, now she wants to prosecute this officer over in Hollenbeck Division for beating up this homeless man. That's never happened before. I think it's convenient, and I'm not buying it. And I think if she gets back in office, folks, if you don't vote, a no vote is a vote. If you vote for her, then you deserve what you get.
So, but people are saying that Gascon comes from that Daryl Gates era, and it'll be taking a few steps back.
I disagree. And I'll tell you why. Because, now I'll tell you this, the LA Police Protective League is certainly campaigning mightily against Gascon. Because why? Well, he wants to bring accountability. And while I don't know him personally, he was on the department when I was there. I do know that he left LA and he went to San Francisco, where he was the police chief for a while. And then he didn't get the support that he needed because he was trying to make a difference. And he went on to become a district attorney. I did have an opportunity to meet and collaborate with him when he was a DA up in Frisco with regards to police reform and police accountability. And so I believe that his heart is in the right place. And I think the fact that the Police Protective League, that's our union, for those who don't know, they have spent millions of dollars campaigning against him in support of Jackie Lacey. So why is it do you think that the Los Angeles Police Protective League is throwing buckets of money at Jackie Lacey over Gascon? Not because he's, comes from the era of Daryl Gates, but because Jackie Lacey is more in lockstep with any police shooting is a good police shooting.
Wow. Interesting perspective. Good information. But we have to vote. So this is an important issue in the county, and we really need to examine that. So everybody, you're going to hear a lot of voices on Coffee Conversations about voting, because this is so important. And here locally, you see that we got our hands full. We really need to pay attention to this race. So very, very important. All right. So now, whew, I'm a little breathless after that. After that one there, that's a lot. All right, so but the results of that snafu are long ranging. Even I can see this going even past after Jackie Lacey and them are long gone. They're still going to be wrestling with, with the results of these guys falsifying records and all of that. I mean, wow. What happens inside the department? Heads are rolling, people getting fired. What happens?
Oh yeah. Heads are rolling. Be sure. And listen, they're talking about 750 cases is what I read that are possibly in jeopardy and could be thrown out. That's just what they're admitting to. That's what they say. How many cases for real? For real? Because here's the problem. Anytime a police officer is caught lying, falsifying documentation, that means that everything that officer has been involved in, put their name on, is now tainted. They can't be trusted. And that's why when a police officer is accused of, they call it false and misleading statements, in other words, lying, generally an officer will be fired administratively if you are believed to be, shown to be a liar. You're ineffective. And we know this to be true because we heard this come out of the mouth of the commissioner on the NYPD about a year or so ago with regards to Daniel Pantaleo. Now understand, Daniel Pantaleo didn't get fired because he choked Eric Garner. Daniel Pantaleo was fired because there was a civilian review board who got hold of some information that the commissioner didn't really want them to know, which was he lied. And the commissioner said that Daniel Pantaleo was ineffective. And that's why he was fired. These police officers are also ineffective. Everything they have touched is tainted now, and everybody gets a get out of jail free card.
Wow. Now, talk about, I don't know if you have knowledge or advocacy within surrounding cities of LA. So we're based out in Long Beach here. After I left the radio station, I came out here to Long Beach and to be by the water and start our new paradigms of broadcasting here. And, in the wake of all of this, peaceful protest sort of, I'm watching what, like in Long Beach, the police are, the city is stepping forth with this formula of reconciliation, and you're hearing public safety meetings and all of that. But the people seem like they are feeling tainted because the Police Protective League or the police union have such a large financial stake in the politics of the city. Explain to the lay people out here, to the folks, how does that work? Now, why does the union have so much money on the table in terms of elections?
Well, police unions are nothing more than lobbying arms of a police department. That's what they do. And our police union is no different. And I'm sure every other across the United States is no different. They pay inordinate amount of monies to campaigns, like we see them pumping money into the campaign of Jackie Lacey. I testified a couple of times up in Sacramento with regards to AB 392 when it was being put forth by Assemblywoman Shirley Weber and the others. And I testified along with some unions, the California Police Chiefs Association, their attorneys were all trying to say that it would just be too much trouble to ask a police officer to have to think before he pulls his trigger on a gun. And when you have unions paying money to politicians, when it comes time to make a decision, you kind of understand why Jackie Lacey maybe wouldn't want to meet with the community, why Jackie Lacey maybe wouldn't want to prosecute a police officer who shot someone first, rather than as a last resort like we're trained and taught. Because guess what? Her campaign just got $2 million. They put her over the hump because listen, it's not a done deal, and she's in a fight for her life, and she wants this for whatever reason. With all the stuff that goes on at her house, she says that, you know, it's a lot. You would think that she would just want to go on with Mr. Lacey and enjoy whatever is left.
Right.
But I guess when you start breathing that special air, it's kind of hard to let go, right? So they're very powerful.
Wow, incredible. Well, you know what? I'm going to encourage everybody to just keep on, keeping your eye on this situation. What now? Let me ask you, Sergeant Dorsey. I have some friends who are on police. That's the homies. This is their job. They're police officers. Talk about what they're feeling now from that side of the. I mean, I know one of my good friends. I can see in his post, I can see, hey, he's in pain. It's like, oh, damn, another shooting, another bad actor. What can we say to our friends in the community, in the village that are serving the blue? How can we help them? And what are they feeling right now?
Well, probably the same consternation that you're feeling. I mean, it's not like we don't know. If you find somebody who looks like me and you who'll be honest, they'll tell you the real. But the fact of the matter is that you can't speak that way if you want to promote, right? If you want to do well, and everybody comes on the police department to do well, make money. We're there to serve the community, but I've grown accustomed to eating meat on a regular basis. And so right. I want to promote, right? So you have to decide who you are, and what are you willing to do and what are you willing to not do, right? And so I think if in the instance, because I have people ask me this all the time, why don't the good officers tell on the bad officers? If they don't tell, then they're just as bad as the others. Well, because listen, I say to community, put that onus on the police chief, because every police chief knows that officers can be retaliated against, because every police chief was once a police officer. They know the environment, they know the culture, they know that if you out there on 54th and Western and somebody's handing you your ass and you get on the radio and ask for backup and they're, stopping at red lights before they get to you, or, they're finishing up this burger they just got at Burger King, it's a problem. And so I know this to be true because during my time on LAPD, I complained about things that I thought were inappropriate, not only by my peers, but also by my supervisors. And I went to that safe place that LAPD had me thinking existed, but I was long enough on the job to know what was up. But I went to that safe place and I told, because I just was not going to be dealt with. I was being sexually harassed by command staff. And before I could leave downtown LA, I was working Newton Division. Before I could just drive 2 miles from downtown LA at the ombudsman's office back to Newton to to report on this command staff officer, both captains in Newton Division already knew I had just left. They already knew. And I knew that they were going to know. So when I was at the ombudsman, this is what I said to them. I said, here's the deal. I want to be transferred administratively out of this unit, not now, but right now, because I can't win as a sergeant against 2 captains, a captain 1 and a captain 3. I can't win. So I want to be administratively transferred so they don't retaliate against me. And so they granted me that. They administratively transferred me. And I also said, you're not going to give me free weight therapy, which is send me to Devonshire Division when I'm living in the Inland Empire, right? You're not going to punish me with travel. So they put me in Central Division, which was right next door to Newton Division. And guess what? The captain at Central Division knew why I was being administratively transferred, and everybody in a position of authority in Central Division treated me like shit. Why? Because I told. And I didn't just tell, I told on command staff. So there's a price to pay. And most people are not willing to pay that price. If you have been working and did your time and worked morning watch, and now you finally have got a coveted job and you're working Monday through Friday, you're like a regular person, maybe you're a soccer mom, you got weekends off, are you going to risk reporting bad behavior, reporting an errant officer when you know you don't have the support of your watch commander, the captain, and ultimately the police chief? Why would you do that? So if they wanted to change this system, the culture, they would create a real safe zone. Whistleblower protection doesn't exist. You know this to be true because you see what's going on in the government with whistleblowers. So if it can happen in the White House, you understand it could happen in 77th, Newton, Southeast. You pick a division.
Wow, and in Central Division, that's a tough one. That's down there at Skid Row. I went there. You remember when the police shot the homeless man like, I don't know, 50 times there right in front of the Union Rescue Mission? It was Brother Africa. Do you remember that case there? You know, I was I'll tell you a quick story. So that one really struck me deeply in my heart because, on the news, they kept reporting that he had done, time for a bank robbery. And for me, I spent a lot of time, ministering on Skid Row. So I feel like that was, irrelevant just because, people don't just wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'm gonna live on Skid Row. Something happens in your life that lands you down there. And I had, very familiar with the area. So I spent about a week just going down after work, walking the streets of Skid Row, talking to the people on the streets about, the character of Brother Africa and in context of the Skid Row community. And at the end of the day, I really felt like he deserved a funeral. And so I got with a few of my friends in the ministry, and long story short, we ended up having a funeral. It took us 3 months, but we had a funeral for him, and it was a really, really big deal. But I want to ask you, in that experience, I felt like, just like I'm feeling today, is I wanted to hear from the side of the police. And so I went down there with my good friend, Dion Joseph RoboCop, and he was in Central Division. I did a ride along with him. I wanted to see, what do you guys see in context of the Skid Row community? And it was pretty eye opening. I mean, I got to admit, it's a tough job. Okay. So having said that, having understanding the intensity of your day-to-day job as a police officer, how can we I guess what I'm asking is, how can you really, really expect a person to keep their cool all the time and be under control? Is it always under the training, or is you have to have a special something in your personality trait to not just off somebody out here, these crazy folks and criminals that are on these streets?
I think it takes a special kind of person. It's not for everybody. Be clear. And so we're trained. For me, I think women do a better job at it, right? I think girls rock.
Right.
We just do better. I as a female officer, I was clear. There's not a man out there I could beat up. I'm clear. There's not a man out there that I could beat up. And listen, I dealt with some bad boys. I had people run from me. I had people fight me. I'll fight you. I had people cuss me out, black, brown, white, depending on what was going on in the moment. But what I knew at the end of the day is they don't know me. They don't know nothing about Cheryl. They are mad at that uniform. And so I never took it personal. I think men are very different. You guys are built differently. And I think when, someone refuses to follow an order or come here, the first thing guys want to do is fight. You want a piece of me, and then the next thing they're cracking you over the head with a flashlight, because that was what was going on back in the day, right? Cracking you over the head with a flashlight, booking you on the 13th floor. Folks who've been in the system know what that means. You just got your ass whipped and you got to go to the jail ward over down at a county USCMC, right? And so that's what guys want to do. I don't want to fight you. I really don't. I will, be clear, but that's not what I want. So, as a female, I knew I had to use other means and measures to gain compliance sometime. And there were guys, there were bad actors, there were gangsters, hardcore murderers who were mad as hell that I was taking them to jail. But I reminded them, guess what, dude, you did this old dumb stuff, not me. And so they'd be like, yeah, Dorsey, you right. And they turn around mad, cussing and fussing, and allow me to handcuff them. That's what I want. I don't take it personal. And so officers need to know to not take stuff personal. And if you can't teach it, if they don't rely on their training, if they can't get out of their head that you're not here to punish, and that's a whole nother thing, because I just came across something not too long ago. I have a podcast that I do every week. It's called Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. And I was talking about this punisher mentality. And there's actually a cartoon character, I didn't know this, but there's a cartoon character called the Punisher. And there are police departments who actually have this logo, some on their vehicles. Pasadena PD specifically, according to the article that I read, and a whistleblower from Pasadena Police Department said that it's actually that logo, that there's a flag that flies in the weight room on the Pasadena Police Department. And so you understand, it's the mindset, it's the mentality. Piss me off, there's a price to pay. Punisher. Police chief knows that on Pasadena PD, just like any other police department that has that logo. It's very imposing. It's a skull, it's a white skull with these long dagger-like teeth, very intimidating. Mm-hmm. And so if that's the mindset, if that's the mentality, then that's what officers are going to do. And if they can punish somebody once or twice and they get away with it, then it's like, well, shoot, the next time I might punish them a little sooner and a little longer. And then, you know, we wind up with a death.
All right. So civilian oversight commissions, do they work?
They're helpful, but, you know, they don't have any teeth. You know, our police commission is helpful. They make a recommendation. And then after they make a recommendation, police chief says, thank you. And then they do what the hell they want, right? We had that happen here in 2014 when LAPD gang officers in Newton Division shot Ezell Ford. Then police commission said it was a problem. The shooting was out of policy. They didn't like it. And Chief Charlie Beck said, okay. And then he went right up to the roof of the admin building over there on Temple and recorded an audio to the troops to say, hey, I got you. I support you. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's nice to have, but it would be also nice if they actually had some teeth behind their decision making, if they could actually maybe compel a police chief to do a thing, because at the end of the day, what a lot of people don't understand is police chiefs are powerful. This is their fiefdom. They do what they want, and they really don't answer to anyone other than the mayor. And so that's why I say, for anyone who has angst about a police chief who's not holding their officers accountable, and we could talk a little bit about that with this whole police reform thing, understand that every police chief serves at the pleasure of a mayor or a city manager who's an elected official. And we know elected officials understand one thing and one thing only: votes.
Yeah, that's it. You're absolutely right. And I think, you know, we're seeing something with the county sheriff has the, you know, when their commission subpoenaed the sheriff and he didn't even show up. He was like, I don't have to come down there. Oh, well. All right. So what does police reform look like to you?
Accountability. Accountability, plain and simple. You know, I'm seeing not only here in Los Angeles with, God bless him, Police Chief Mike Moore, and others talk about everything but holding officers accountable. You would think accountability was a 4-letter word, because unless officers know, and I'm gonna just tell you, as a ground pounder, and I did this for 20 years, as a street cop, I don't give a damn where you put money. I don't care where you reallocate it. I don't care who you call in for mental illness, health practitioners, because, you know, that's not even doable on a traffic stop. If I stop somebody who's having a mental episode, I don't know that when I pull them over. So I don't have time to say, hold up, before you act a fool, let me get a clinician here. I'm going to go ahead and hit you in the head with this flashlight, or I'm going to shoot you 7 times, right? So I don't care where you move money. The only thing that matters to me is every other Wednesday when we get paid. So if you want to affect change on a police department, then you need to do something about qualified immunity. That's legislation, folks. Y'all need to get involved, get engaged with your legislators. You need to do something about, and I'm hearing that there's legislation right now being put forth by a senator in Gardena, Bradford, to decertify police officers, because here in California, we are licensed, certified by post peace officer standards and training, and it's much like a driver's license. If I don't have a post certificate, I can't be a cop. So if an officer, according to this legislation that's being put forth, I think it's SB 731, I think that's the number. Look it up, get a hold of Senator Bradford up in Sacramento. Once you take an officer's certification, they can't leave LAPD because they just shot and killed somebody and resign before they can pull the levers to actually terminate them, because we are given due process under the Police Officers Bill of Rights. So before you fire me on LAPD, shoot, I'm already over at Hawthorne trying to get a job, and I'm gonna take my post and go there. Or I'm going to go to Rialto or Fontana. I mean, you pick a place, right? There's 18,000 police departments. We saw that happen in Tulsa, Oklahoma with Betty Shelby after she shot and killed Terrence Crutcher in the back. Why? Because he's a big black man who scared her more than anything ever in her entire life as he walked away from her with his hands in the air. She shoots him in the back. A jury, because we weren't on it, didn't acquit her. I mean, did not find her guilty. She was able to resign, the gift of resignation, and then she went right next door to a neighboring sheriff's department where she's a reserve, and I believe their reserves work for free. This heifer just wants to be the cop so bad that she's willing to work for free. But what she is doing over there in the state of Oklahoma is they have allowed her to teach a course to not only that state, but to others around the nation. And she calls it How to Survive a Critical Incident. I call it How to Get Away with Murder. Wow. That's what happens when you don't decertify an errant officer.
Okay, so, we have reached out to Brother Steve Bradford. I will call you back again today there, Steve. I need you to come on Coffee Conversations and talk about this and other things happening up there in Sacramento. Okay, so defund the police, we're hearing a lot. Excuse me. For me, at its face value, it's like, well, come on now. Like, truth be told, we need the police out here. Come on now. But
absolutely.
Defund the police, what do you say?
Listen, Mayor Garcetti said he was going to take $150 million out of the police budget. Okay, doesn't affect me. I just need you to make sure you take care of me every other Wednesday. They're going to take that money and move it where, do what with it? I don't know. They said that they're not going to allow officers to work overtime. Okay, works for me. I just did an 8-10 hour shift. I don't want to work overtime. And so defunding the police doesn't really mean what these people think it means. Also, right now, you probably know there was a lot of hoopla because Chief Mike Moore just created a bureau for a Black female captain who he is about to promote to deputy chief. And that has never happened in the history of ever. Amata Tingarides, Captain 1, for barely a year, is now going to skip Captain 2, 3, and Commander and become a deputy chief over a new bureau that they created. They had a big press conference on all the news stations a couple of days ago. Community Safety Partnership, I think it's called. Feels good, sounds good. I think it's important, but what are we doing to stop officers like Tony McBride a week or two ago who shot a man in Newton Division because he was walking in her direction with a box cutter in his hand, some distance away? Tactically, I believe she certainly could have done something other than shoot this man 6 times, 4 of which happened after he was already on the ground. Is moving money around, is stopping police officers from working overtime going to stop that kind of behavior? Probably not, because now we know, if you check, and I'm telling you stuff that's all out there in the ethernet, Google it, Tony McBride, Toni, daughter of Jamie McBride, director of the Los Angeles Police Protective League. And they love their big guns. This girl says that every day she's off, she's out shooting bazookas because she's a little model. She's really cute, really attractive, and she's a model spokesperson for some kind of a tactical company that promotes her and her dad. And she shot this man with a box cutter, shot him twice, he dropped. And while he was on the ground, she shot him 2 more times. She paused and she shot him 2 more times. And LAPD is trying to say, through their protective league, through her dad, that was a textbook shooting. Perfect. How does defunding the police, reallocating money, stop that?
Yeah, interesting. I think I just met because Chief Moore was at this protest that I went to in Leimert Park a few weeks back. And they were talking about, there was a sister there. She had the stars already on her little collar. And I was like, oh, okay. So they created a new bureau for her. And what does the bureau do? What is the purpose?
Well, it kind of reminds me of like community-based policing back in the day. And so they've created ways in which the community and the police can mesh, work together, get to know each other. It's a good thing. There was a couple of councilmen who were at this press conference that they had the other night. can't say the gentleman's name, but his area is South Park, because he mentioned how South Park is now a safe place where families can go, and officers who work that area have a relationship and a rapport with the community. All of that is great and good. All of that is needed. You need to know me. I need to know you, because back in the day, there used to be senior lead officers, P3+1 is what we call them, who would have community watch meetings, right? And we had a captain from a neighborhood, civilian captain, who was over that particular community. And if you had an issue, you call your senior lead officer, and you liaison with that senior lead officer, who would then tell the officers who work the A car in that area, what the problem was. And so you got to know one another. All of that is great and good, but we're missing that accountability component, because if you don't do something to deter bad behavior, if you don't do something that stops officers, if I know that when I shoot and kill somebody, all I got to do is say, he scared me, or he was advancing on me, like Tony McBride did when she shot this man 6 times. If I just have to say that, it's very difficult to argue what's in my head. And if I know I have the support of my police union, because my dad is a director, and ultimately my police chief, why would I do anything different the next time a man scares me?
Is that current price over South Park? Used to be called, we called it Barry White Park at one point. We renamed it. That was is that still District 9? No, huh?
I think it's a brand new district, because when they were I don't live in LA, but when they were talking about it on the news, they said, this is a brand new district, but not so new. And the guys, it wasn't current price, it was someone else. If you said it, I can tell you if you say it. But there was also another councilman whose name is Buscayano. I think he's
Joe Buscayano.
Yeah, he's a former LAPD officer who became a council member. So it was Buscayano and this other gentleman from the South Park area. And they were talking about this new bureau. Understand what I'm telling you. They created an entire bureau, like Central Bureau,
wow,
South Bureau, West Bureau, Valley Bureau. So now they have community, they call it CSP, community, because we like acronyms, Community Safety Partnership. And they put Amada Tingarides, brand new captain, soon to be Black female deputy chief, over this new bureau. It has never happened in the history of ever. Now,
wow,
why, I don't know.
Now, is she related to it's the same way as Phil Tingarides?
That's her husband? Her. The same woman who, when they were looking for Christopher Dorner, was put up on stage in her Class A uniform with her little Sergeant 2 stripes and said, I've never seen racism anywhere on the LAPD. It doesn't exist.
Wow. Oh, man.
That's Tingarides.
When we look at our municipal governments, and here I just got to say again, it is important for us to pay attention, you guys. Listen to Sergeant Dorsey, listen to others around, and make up your own mind, because there's a lot going on in our cities in Southern California, indeed across the country, but at the municipal level, there's a lot going on right now. City Hall is crazy right now. There's like investigations, there's people getting arrested, there's council people getting hauled out in handcuffs, the police department. Oh my goodness. What is our hope, Sergeant Dorsey?
Well, listen, it's a multifaceted approach that we have to take. And so I don't want to just, stir everybody up and then let you go mad, right? So there's some stuff we have to do. But if you don't get involved and get engaged, and you really can't be mad about it. I know that, for instance, when Chief Charlie Beck was up for a second term and they had meetings around the city, and I went to one of them, and there were like maybe 5 or 6 people who look like me there. And I'm like, what the hell? You know what I mean? If you don't attend these meetings, if you don't go and ask Police Chief Mike Moore what I'm saying right now, if I'm saying something that resonates and you got a question and you want to know about accountability, sir, I get CSP, sounds amazing. But what you going to do about Tony McBride, sir? Right. What are you going to do about how do we stop the LAPPL, Los Angeles Police Protective League, from throwing buckets of monies at politicians to gain favor when there's legislation that we want passed and it gets watered down because of all the money that the Los Angeles Police Protective League has given to a campaign? What do we do about that? How do we change that? So we got to get involved. We got to get engaged. We got to vote. We got to get on these juries, and we got to be present and in that courtroom when an officer says, it made sense to me to not use one magazine, but two, and understand each of our magazines holds 15 rounds because this guy scared me. I want to know what scared you about that. What was it after the first, second round? They're on the ground, seemingly dead, not moving. Granted, they're still holding a box cutter, the young man in Newton. He's got a box cutter in his hand. He's on the ground. What was it about that, Tony, that made you think you need to shoot him 4 more times? If we're not on the jury, we can't ask those questions.
Yeah, we have to participate because you know what? I have seen that. I've seen cities try to, they have sessions, they have these gatherings, they have the information that are, these are issues that are affecting our community, and we're not there. This framework for reconciliation out here in Long Beach. I know the first session that they had, it was a call because we're in this COVID-19 environment, so it was a WebEx call. And one of the first questions asked was, who can describe issues of racism or police abuse, in the city of Long Beach? But there was nobody African American on the call. It's like we weren't even there to be, to have our voices be heard. This is really something we've got to participate in these things. All right.
And I want to just say this real quick because, you got to get on the department. I want to be a recruitment tool. I talk a lot, and I'm not trying to scare anybody off. One of the things that I learned from my conversation with Chief Moore and the captain, Aaron McCarney from Personnel Division, is that right now Blacks make up 9% of the force on the LAPD. 9%. Hispanics are 49.6. That's a problem. That's a problem. And so promoting a Black woman to deputy chief when you got 9% Blacks is a problem. Yeah, that's a whole nother show. Yes. But those are the kinds of questions that need to be asked.
All right, talk briefly about your book. Tell us, Black and Blue is the name of the book. What is that about?
So it's an autobiography, talks about my 20-year career on the Los Angeles Police Department, as well as the advocacy work that I got involved in after the Christopher Dorner incident. That's when I first wrote the book, not knowing that in 2014 there was going to be a spate of deadly uses of force with Eric Garner, Mike Brown, Tamir Rice, John Crawford, and every other name I could rattle off between 2014 and now. So I published a revised version in 2018, thus Creation of a Social Advocate. And I talk about the things that I'm sharing here with you, what I think makes sense to keep you safe in a police encounter. Comply, complain, trying to hold court curbside will get you hurt. I talk about my experiences on the LAPD under the command of Daryl Francis Gates, Willie Williams, and Bernard Parks. I talk about shenanigans. I name names. I give you events and occurrences. And when I don't name names, you can Google the event and you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. So I just wanted people to understand what it is to be a police officer, look like me during the time that I did, and why it's so important that we get involved and get engaged as a community to make change from the outside in and from the inside out.
All right. Tell us where we can get the book there, Sergeant Dorsey.
You can purchase an autographed, signed copy by me if you go to my website, sgtcheryldorsey.com. If you just want a garden variety version, you can purchase it on Amazon. And also, please do follow me, subscribe. You can hear this kind of dialogue every week on my podcast, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, SGT Cheryl Dorsey, YouTube channel, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. So I'm all over social media. I'm trying to get the word out here, there, and everywhere. So reach out if you have a question, do that, and I will respond back to you personally. So thank you, Greg, so much for having me on. I appreciated our time together. And given this day, this is so important because I am just sad that we are memorializing John Lewis, but I intend to do my part and continue with his legacy, and I mean to get in good trouble.
That's right. All right. That's what's up. Hey, let me ask you a question real quick, and I'm going to ask you a little bit more about it offline there, but can I link to your podcast on our beachcityradio.com?
Sure.
All right, yeah. We want to
Yeah.
continue the dialogue. I mean, a valuable resource, and we would love for you to come back with us to share with us about. We want to have a full understanding of the movement right now. We are in such an important time right now, and emotions get the best of us. We get out there, and it's easy for us to go say, Black Lives Matter, defund the police.
Yeah, it all sounds good, but my job is to help you decipher police code talk. And so let's do it again.
Changing the system for good, and it's people like you, Sergeant Dorsey, that are making a difference. I appreciate you so much. I would love to talk to you about the whole Christopher Dorner thing. I worked at the radio station when that was going down. It was like, whoa.